It's the NBA Finals. We're here, the Just Basketball Boys, all here, back together since the first time we did a show when we brought Wes on to complete the triumvirate. And that's right, we got sound effects. It's all here. And we're going to start this preview, guys, by asking a question in the cold open about Al Horford. Guys, do you have a favorite Al Horford era, Al Horford moment? Because this is the old man Al Horford run. He's the elder statesman. I'll give you a second to think about this because I just want to point something out. We've been having an Al Horford, he's been in our basketball lives since about 2007. Okay, this is when he's at Florida, coached by Billy Donovan, current Bulls head coach. National title game against Greg Oden's Ohio State. I'm going to read you some names, just some dudes that were in this national title game. Greg Oden, Mike Conley, David Lighty, Daquan Cook on the Ohio State side, some other random guys who didn't really go on to have pro careers, but that was a heralded Ohio State team, maybe the most heralded Ohio State team of ever. Not to trigger Wes
around?
Maybe walk-on of that era? I'm not sure. Not in there. The Florida team. A little more loaded with guys. Torian Green, but more notably, Al Horford, Corey Brewer, Joakim Noah. Maurice Spates played 6 minutes off the bench in that game. Lee Humphrey was like the spot-up shooter du jour of the college basketball season that year. The only two guys left playing professional basketball from that game were just still in the NBA. Were Al Horford in the NBA Finals, Mike Conley just in the Western Conference Finals, and just obviously signed an extension with the Wolves earlier this year. They're still kicking, but most of these guys are gone, and Al Horford still an integral part of the Boston Celtics, an integral part of the NBA title favorites right now. So Al Horford, what a remarkable career. He's been around for forever at this point. Shout out Al Horford. I have a favorite Al Horford memory, but do you guys have anything that sticks to mind?
Go ahead.
No,
I want to hear your Al Horford memory. I have zero Al Horford memories.
I just remember seeing him. This is because it was like an in-arena thing. I just remember him looking very dejected in like that era where they kept running his Hawks teams when he was the best player on those Hawks teams. Like nothing they could do to stop those LeBron teams. Like those teams were good, really well coached, all of that.
So your favorite Al Horford moment was his worst professional moment?
Yes. I'm being a hater. Because here's the thing, there's nothing
way to
he
talk
could
him
do.
up as he goes for his first title ever, Chris.
But here's the thing.
I loved when he was crying in the locker
Here's the
room
thing.
after losing to the best player
Here's
of all
the thing.
time.
The Al Horford has lived these basketball lives where he's won. He's been like an underrated guy, I think, in the sense of he's never been like a top 10 guy in the NBA. He's been on these really great teams, a consummate winner. He's had weird stuff where like he could have had the Philly experience to like back up Joel Embiid and basically stolen away to be the Embiid stopper. And then he ends up back in Boston anyway, had the weird sojourn away, all this stuff that was just weird. And yet he's still here. It's the perseverance of having all these things that could have kept him from competing for a title again, and yet he's here. To me, it's just like the fact that he's had all these lives in his career, to me, speaks to how long he's been around and kicking butt. So to me, it's like it could have been that. It could have been that one shot. That's my point.
You mentioned my favorite Al Horford era, and I can't help but to laugh when we're talking about eras in terms of Al Horford, like he's Taylor Swift or something. But
Shut up.
It's the Philadelphia one, right? They were weirdly ahead of their time with the two big lineup with Joel Embiid and Al Horford, and they just screwed it up.
I don't think Sixers. Yeah. I don't think Sixers fans would say
Elton Brand ahead of his time. I don't think that's anything anyone has ever said.
Chestnut checkers, and then he had that one weird year in Oklahoma City, and that's right about the time where I started getting really annoyed with Al Horford supporters. Like everybody's like, well, you don't watch the Thunder, but I do because they win 10 games. They're winning 10 games a year, and Al Horford's still got it. And I'm like, all right, relax. Like he's your every basketball nerd's favorite player is Al Horford because he's gotten underappreciated. I'm like, he's fine, dude. Like these guy's been fine his whole career.
Yeah,
he's got 5 All-Star appearances. He made an All-NBA third team once.
That's it. Wow.
What do you mean that's it? That's a perfect amount for him. 5?
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
so
but
many.
I guess like just playing in the East when the East was so bad, it's like I guess to me I just kind of figured it would have gotten higher. My favorite Al Horford era is the one that's coming next, which is the reunification with Mike Budenholzer here in Phoenix to bring a championship to the Valley of the Sun. That's where it's headed, and I cannot wait. That's
we really
where,
did Al Horford justice with this segment.
That's what I'm looking
job,
forward
boys.
to. Back-to-back NBA
Brent-
champion Al Horford. 2024 in
Brendon-
Boston, 2025 in Phoenix. Let's go.
Brendan's clowning me for trying to speak to his perseverance. Doesn't let me finish my thought, and he's like, "I'm fake trading. Like, what are you trading? Bradley Beal waiving his no trade clause to go to Boston for Al Horford?"
I don't think the
Kinda like
salaries
the fit.
quite add up with Al and Beal. No, it would probably be Mr. Nurkic if it had to be anybody. But yeah,
finally give Boston
there you
a
go.
tough shot maker.
Another white dude can never have too many of those out there. Yeah, I think it's happening, and Bud needs his guy. Bud needs his man. So let's do it.
All things considered, I think if Boston wins this, I don't think there's anyone I would be happier to see win a title than Al Horford. Just like this could be his last shot. You never
Drew
know
Holiday,
these things.
much higher on the list.
Okay, but he's already won one. That's my point.
I just want good things for him.
Despite the fact
And I
that
don't
he's
count
such
the
a shoulder.
2021 championship. Did you see how naturally I kind of forgot about it there?
Yeah.
That one doesn't really
you-
count for me.
you
Yeah.
just blanked that out of your head. Yeah. All right, coming up on today's show, we've got a jam-packed Just Basketball show. 95% of it, we're going to preview the NBA Finals, and we're going to start peeking ahead
Is that an
to the
exact
offseason.
percentage?
No, just guessing, Wes.
All right.
I don't do math. We don't do math here. We rely on people. We're just guessing.
Sorry.
5% of it, thereabouts. Who do you think I am? Cap guy? No. 5% of it or so. I'm going to look ahead to talk about the Detroit Pistons offseason. That's coming up today on the Just Basketball Show.
Spectacular move by Michael Jordan. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Welcome into the Just Basketball Show. I am Chris Manning. Up left is Brendon Kleen. Down bottom, that's Wes Goldberg. We're coming to you 3 times a week covering all things hoops. That's NBA, WNBA, where there's a lot of Caitlin Clark discourse right now for weird reasons. That cycle is happening. But today is all about the NBA Finals and a little bit of the Detroit Pistons. The NBA Finals are here. We've got to the end of the NBA season, and we're going to cover all angles of it on today's show. Series matchups we're looking at, some best bets we're going to look at, matchups, the return of Kristaps Porzingis, give our series predictions as well. And if you're looking for somewhere to place your bets, we should tell you about our partner and today's sponsor, BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBasketball, and you'll sign up to get a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how that works. Step 1, you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, you deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. You just make sure you use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. Guys, NBA Finals time. Where do we want to start? Who do we want to give our first big question to as we kick off our preview?
I'll go first. We're going to pass around the baton here and ask a big question that will define the series. Bounce around each team, each side of the court, key players, all that good stuff. And I think that the best place to start is the single best player in the series, which is Luka Doncic. And so, guys, my question to encapsulate everything that will have to happen to keep this guy relatively in check or beat him is, can Boston win a series where Luka averages 35 plus? And here's my thinking. Here's the reason I phrase it that way. Based on how Boston plays defense, they're going to guard him more, I think, one-on-one and switch 1 through 5 and pick and roll and just trust that to work. Trust their backside help if needed and stay within that structure more than any team he's faced this whole postseason. And I kind of think that the Celtics are maybe best suited to... It sounds so dumb to be reductive and just say, let Luka have his and all that. You're going to lose if you just let him do that. But kind of trust the numbers, trust the math here and say, if we allow Luka to get a tough 35, but PJ Washington doesn't get hot like he did against the Thunder. And, maybe the lobs aren't quite as in high supply to Derek Jones or Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford the way they have been. And maybe we can send a little more resources toward Kyrie so he's not getting wide open angles to the basket because we're overexposed containing Luka. I feel like that's what they will do. I think Luka will cook that. So the question becomes, can they win anyway if all of that happens and Luka does play as well as we expect? And I think that could decide the series. What do you guys think?
I think you're right. I think that's what we're going to see from Boston. Doesn't really double team anybody. And they're pretty happy, I think, having Jaylen Brown guard Luka Doncic. It's what they did the one game that really mattered again after the trade deadline, March 1st, Boston, when the Boston Celtics and the Mavericks played each other. But what's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody's got a great plan until they get punched in the face. Like if Luka goes off for 20 points in the first 9.5 minutes of Game 1, it's okay. Like good. Are you still gonna not double him? Right. And even if the idea is we're not doubling him and we're going to trust the math, because the one thing we do know about Joe Mazzulla is he loves to trust math. It's his favorite thing. So they're going to try to do it, but it's going to require a lot of discipline if Luka's going off, because it is instinctual for a basketball player. If that guy's going off, I'm going to show a little bit more. I'm going to be a half step or a full step over, a little bit closer to him. And then that's when Kyrie Irving, one pass away, Luka kicks it out to him, and then he starts going off too. So it's going to require a lot of discipline, but I do think that that's going to be the plan. To answer your question, if he's averaging 35, that's probably what the Mavericks want, and he's still going to find guys, right? He's still going to find PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. in the corner because he gets so close. He gets right under the basket before he makes these passes. His penetration, how deep he gets, it's right under the rim, and it's just every defense collapses. It doesn't matter. You're not going to just let him go there. So. I will be very interested to see how disciplined they can be.
He can make you rotate more than any player in the league, even when you don't want to.
Right.
Like, these are basketball players. Even if the coaching staff all of these past week and a half have been telling them, we are going to stick to our shooters, here's our help principles, only take a step at this moment when this happens and get in his way at this exact part of the play as it's developing and everything else.
And he sees it. He
has
gets you into
head
rotation
of steam downhill, like they're gonna collapse, and then he's gonna make, like, he can make those split second passes and shots like nobody. So it's easier said than done for sure. But I could see them winning a series where he is shooting 45% from the field. Maybe those pull-up threes don't go in as much as they have, and they're able to kind of win all the other elements of the series. And that's kind of what you have to do. It's probably what people said about Jordan, right? Like, that's not going to change. That's the element he's going to score. How else can we win, I think, is the question.
The thing I'll be watching then, I think, off of that is, okay, so Boston plays it more straight up. They live with some of the Luka rotation. Maybe they panic the first game and they freak out because it's going to be unlike anything they've seen in this postseason run. Get tested in that way. We haven't seen them tested defensively because there's no one else like him. There's no one in the East like him. There's no one in the league like him in this way. Once they maybe calm down, they get back to their game plan. We understand how good this defense is, how good it can be. And is there less room for the PJ Washingtons, the Daniel, the Derek Jones Jr.'s, the Maxi Klebas, like the role guys for Dallas, the Jaden Hardys if he gets minutes in this series? What does the room look like for them off of Luka? Because that's like the secret sauce to all of this, is that those guys get empowered by Luka, but they also have a little more room. And like those are the margins. They don't need all of those guys to get scorching hot. They need two of them to get scorching hot, right? Like that's the sauce here. If Luka is 45% and it's one or two of those guys is hot for a couple of games, that's enough. If those guys are contained enough and there's just a little less of window for them to score, attack, whatever, then I think this becomes a little more tolerable. And they just say, okay, Luka had a great game, but PJ Washington was 3 of 12 or whatever. Then I think Boston's like, yeah, we trust the process, but that's like, to me, like the two sides of that coin that I can't wait to see how it plays out.
I think where you might see the next ripple start to happen of something that Boston could take away that would make the series look different than what Dallas has been able to do in other series is in transition. Boston's transition defense is elite. They're fine to cross-match. They don't crash the offensive glass a ton, so they're going to be back. And now, do they have the size to take away Derrick Jones Jr. looking like an airplane on a basketball court? Maybe not. Nobody really does. He's a freak athlete, as are the centers. But if they're kind of in position, in the way, and that faucet gets not turned off, but turned down a little bit, maybe the Mavs get 4 to 6 less points here and there on those plays, and Kyrie is a little less effective if he can't attack in those broken, chaotic kind of semi-transition situations. And you just start to compound, like you said, Chris, if the threes aren't going in from the role players, the transition's a little less. We talked about if they are playing it a little more straight up, Kyrie doesn't have those pockets quite in the same way. He's going to score. I'm not trying to say Kyrie's going to have a bad series, but maybe a little less there. That's how it all adds up.
And
yeah. That's how it all starts to add up to Dallas's offensive rating being 2 points worse, 3 points worse than it has been in these other series. And that's all you need when you're talking about a series we all expect to go 6-7 games.
they're going to need to score in transition too. I mean, their half-court offense was a little bit bottled up even in the Minnesota series, and transition was they got a lot of relief out of that. In the Western Conference Finals, they're going to have to find it. It also gets Lively and Gafford on the run going downhill if they can kind of just sprint. And I don't think Boston centers aren't going to be able to keep up with that. They'll be back, but it's going to end up, if they can kind of push the pace a little bit, getting mismatches under the rim probably with those guys, and that'll be really important too. The other thing too is we're talking about Boston playing this straight up, and I do think that they're going to try not to double. They're going to switch a lot.
Yeah.
But in that March 1st game, they had Jayson Tatum guarding Derek Lively, so they had this junk defense where every time Dallas wants to get to their Derek Lively, Luka Doncic pick and roll. Basically, that guarantees that when they switch that, it's going to be, instead of Jaylen Brown on Luka, it'll be Jayson Tatum on Luka. And those are the guys that can guard him, because Drew Holiday can't guard him. Derek White can't guard him. He put those guys under the basket. He shoots right over them. They got no chance. So I thought that was really interesting by Joe Mazzulla. And Dallas, in that March 1st game, recognized it right away. And they said, okay, this is what you're doing. Derek Lively, we're going to park you in the corner. You're not really going to do much. And now we're going to run our offense through P.J. Washington, which is fine. You know, the pick and roll through P.J. Washington, that's a pick and pop threat and
as
stuff
a roll
like that.
man, which is rare too for them.
It's not P.J. Washington's most effective role, right? You want him in the corner shooting those threes, and it's certainly not Derek Lively's most effective role, because when he stands in the corner, it doesn't matter. They started experimenting more as that game went on with putting Lively in the dunker spot, having him crash from the corner, and taking advantage of the size mismatch against Tatum, getting those offensive rebounds, putbacks, and things like that. He's going to have to be really aggressive if they do that and try to force Boston out of that. Dallas, if Boston does do that, it's going to be on Dallas to get them out of it, because it does defang their offense a little bit when they go with those matchups.
It's just too, though, you saw them even in that game mess up at times. It's easier said than done to switch that action as crisply as you need to against Luka, because they're so comfortable operating that way with, whether it's trying to get a mismatch or it's just trying to create a little bit of an advantage with whoever is setting that screen. Luka can turn what the defense might be planning to switch as suddenly he's downhill, he's finding this little twitch of help, and he's finding a shooter, whatever the case may be. It turns into, if the big man is off the ball and not setting the screen too, in some of the situations you were mentioning, something very similar to what we've all gotten so comfortable and familiar with watching Aaron Gordon in that role with Jokic in that 4-on-3 situation, where the opposing defense might put a Tatum on the ball screener, or if they're setting the screen with a different guy like P.J. Washington, that helper is in kind of the corner. They step up. Now Lively or whoever that is open for a cut and a lob. So it's not as simple as just okay, they'll do that and that'll take care of it, but it's probably the best you could the best you could hope for. I know you wanted to talk about Porzingis, Chris. I feel like this is a good spot to do it because that's kind of if we're talking about a huge first quarter that makes them panic, that's kind of where it's going to show up, I think, is how relentlessly and how effectively Luka's able to torch Porzingis in those situations. He's going to hunt him whenever he's on the court. And again, it's all these little, how many times can that actually be a problem? You're really only talking about a handful of plays in any game, even with somebody as good at it and as aggressive about it as Luka is. How many plays can Boston, like the play that Derek White made to block that Obi Toppin lob? That's a perfect example of something Boston's smaller, low-man help defenders are going to have to do to help if Porzingis is suddenly away from the basket. So he's going to have to hold up, and how healthy he is a big question, but I think there are still answers. Boston just needs to find them, and those guys need to make really awesome plays like they have all year. Like, this is nothing new for the Celtics. They've been undersized. They've been, a little switchy and exposed, and they know how to put out those fires. They just have to do it.
The one last thing I just want to say in transition, just very quickly, and then let's hit on KP. Dallas, 4th in transition efficiency in these playoffs, according to Cleaning the Glass, but 11th in efficiency. Boston, they are, in terms of defensive efficiency, 8th in defensive efficiency, but they allowed the fewest amount of transition opportunities so far in the playoffs. Now, they've played Miami, Cleveland, and Indiana. 2 of those 3 teams are not exactly teams that love to play with any sort of pace.
Yeah.
And
I'm throwing out all of the Celtics playoff stats for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
Like you could
they're exactly.
4-0 in clutch playoff games. I'm like, against who?
Yeah.
I don't care.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm throwing out all of,
also,
but they have been better at that
like,
over the course of the regular season too.
That doesn't even. I feel like the Pacers were scoring pretty well when they ran, so it's almost like, where is that coming from? I kind of
and Dallas too. They're not a team that gets out on the break, but they are opportunistic, right? They'll get the hit-ahead pass. They'll do all these things, and so it's going to be something that Boston has to be aware of for sure because they don't run necessarily that like Kyrie Irving runs, but it's pretty much like the ball moves faster than the players kinds of thing. Josh Green, but yeah, those hit-aheads from Luka and stuff like that. That's a big part of what they do in terms of their quote-unquote transition game. One thing on Kristaps Porzingis, he practiced on Friday. Everybody, according at least to these quotes, it sounds like Joe Mazzulla thinks that he's progressing towards probably being available for Game 1. He's not going to be 100%. What does he look like? They're gonna play him in drop. They always do. Boston does. And we saw Luka carve up Rudy Gobert in that drop defense quite a bit in that Minnesota series. And if Porzingis is not 100%, I kind of love the matchup for Derek Lively and for Daniel Gafford. Getting downhill against that drop defense and putting him under the basket, getting him in foul trouble. And Al Horford's got no chance guarding those guys either. And every time that he got switched onto Luka went to work in that March game. So, yeah, Porzingis is going to be really important. Can he when the Celtics are on offense, can he pull Lively and Gafford away from the basket? That's going to be really big. But Dallas is a way more connected team defensively than they were during the regular season, especially in March. Their help defense is awesome. Their backside rotations are great. They're way farther ahead than where they were right after the trade deadline when these teams played last.
I think it's going to be a low minutes series for Porzingis because of the injury and because of some of these limitations. Yeah. So again, you're just talking about, can you win them by 1 or 2, or in a great situation, maybe he makes enough threes that you win those minutes by even more. But I do think there's Luka can play him off the court. It could get that ugly.
Yeah.
There could be games where Porzingis gets benched and he plays 15 minutes because it's just untenable for him to be out there on defense.
Well, this is the thing. I think considering what we just saw with Luka and Gobert and how Minnesota could not take Gobert off the floor. They couldn't with the way they play and what Gobert is to them. Boston can take Porzingis off the floor. I don't think that it'll be something they'll be super thrilled about in getting him back, but they can do it. But I do think Luka and I think Dallas with the way they play and the way Luka plays with the pick and roll and then hunting and everything comes out of that initial pick and roll, they're going to test it early. If it wouldn't shock me if the first set of the game is let's get Porzingis out on a switch against Luka, and make him dance early. Let's get him out on the perimeter. Let's let Luka bully him. Let's let Luka, even if Luka misses a tough 16-footer or a tough pull-up three or whatever, let's make Porzingis work early. Let's see what it looks like. Let's get some film on it early in the first quarter or the second quarter of that game. Let's figure out where we're at right away. Let's not give him 6 minutes and give him a chance to get in the rhythm offensively, get in a chance to hit a couple shots and get his feet back under him. Let's just put him in the fire right away. To me, that's like, I think we're going to see that right away, and I think that makes a ton of sense.
It was the first play of the game. When these teams play, the first play of the game for the Mavericks was pulling Porzingis into that pick and roll and going at that matchup. So they're going to do that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, like, they did it then. Why would you not do it now when he hasn't played in several weeks and he's got an injury and no one outside of Boston really knows what he's going to be like? And honestly, like, even Boston, he hasn't played in so long. They don't know. No one's going to know until he actually plays.
Also, we can even set aside the injury and his limitations. This is his first, like, part of him missing this postseason is, and they weren't tested very much in general, but he's never played beyond the first round of the playoffs in his life. So, because he had just gotten traded in 2022 when Dallas made their run. The previous couple of years, they got out in the first round. So, he's never had to deal with the margins being this small and the pressure being this high. And I'm not saying, some of that stuff can be a little fake when really, push comes to shove. But considering that he's going to be in that spotlight, being attacked and being hunted and having to knock down the open shots he's going to get immediately, that is also a mental obstacle for him in addition to just all the physical stuff that he's going to have to deal with.
If I'm going to try to answer your original question, Brendan.
Yeah.
Luka scored 37 points in the regular season meeting on 14 of 25 shooting, so 56% shooting, and the Mavericks still lost by 28 points. And part of that is because Kyrie didn't have a good game. He was 9 for 23, but that's sort of your whole idea, right? Make sure the others don't beat them. Now, like I said before, and I think we all agree, the Mavericks are a much better team now than they were then. Derek Jones Jr. was not in the starting lineup at that point. It was still Josh Green in that starting five. So they're just overall better coached, better equipped than they were then. But that's if we're going to try to venture an answer or a guess, that would probably be
I think they can win it too. I think they can win that way too. Yep. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I think Luka in this series, no matter who they pull out, I don't think there's not a single person on Boston's roster I think he's faced by. There's not. Like, I think if it's like Tatum, I think that's the one that's maybe can give him the most issues in terms of length and positionality and strength. Brown a little bit as well, but the guards, even if it's White, even if it's Holiday, he's going to shoot over him. He's going to be stronger than those guys. Horford's going to be this. It's going to look a little bit different, but Horford's going to be the same thing. Horford gets pulled out. Good luck. If Sam Hauser's on the floor, Sam Hauser, my guy, you're getting pulled out, you're getting cooked. Like, there's not a single person Boston can put on the floor that Luka Doncic isn't going to be excited about trying to attack. That's as good as Boston is defensively and how sound their unit is as a whole. The way Luka plays, there's not a single spot on the floor I don't think he's going to be thrilled about attacking.
Yeah, so the question is, can the Celtics win if he scores 35 plus? That was the original question. Yeah. You don't think they can win?
I mean, I don't want to tip my preview. I think they can, but it's going to take. They can win that way, but it's going to take it's going to take Tatum having a great two-way series. It's going to take Brown continuing and building on the playoffs he's had. And I do think you would need like a really good Drew Holiday offensive series, him hitting some threes, the Derek White one of him or White having a good offensive series. And I do think you're going to need one of those Horford series where he's like 36% from three. And like, what do you get from Porzingis offensively is the flip side of that coin. Can Porzingis in his minutes give you like a 15-point game here or there? Can he give you a 20-point game? Like, can you get enough that outweighs some of these benefits? Because we know their offense, when it is flowing and rolling, they can get up to those levels where they can outscore you, can hit those levels where the machine is rolling. We haven't totally seen that in these playoffs, I don't think, where it's totally just been humming. But that's kind of the path here, where the defense maybe just enough and the machine on offense just rolls. I think they can win that way, but it's gonna feel uncomfortable, I think, regardless.
Yeah, puts a lot of pressure on them. Yeah, your question.
Yeah. My question. This is about shot making. This is, I think, a continuation of what Brennan's talking about. I'm going to frame it this way. If this turns into what I'm going to call a Hooper's Delight, shot making from Dallas, what does this mean for Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum? They've been in the finals before. They've gone through this before. This is a chance to maybe level up and learn from what they've done before. We can get into their stats from time before. But is there something they went through before in this, second time through, that they can improve in this and maybe do enough to match those two guys? Because I think it's going to come down on those two guys more than anyone else on Boston's roster, right? Like that, it is going to, the brunt of this is going to fall on those two guys. I think particularly Tatum more than anyone else. Jaylen Brown, I think, has been the best Celtic to date. I think Tatum did start to kind of be the best Celtic toward the end of that Pacers series. I think is where that was headed. I think if Boston wins, Tatum has to be the best guy in this series. I think it kind of has to get back to that to some degree. But is there something in Boston, is there something in what they went through in 2022 and losing to the Warriors where those guys learn from that and maybe a slightly different matchup? They're a little older, a little more seasoned. Can they learn something from that and kind of match what is going to be a really tough shot-making duo from Luka and Kyrie and match that? Like, I think that, to me, is the structure of the series. Ultimately, it's simple. It's going to get muddy. I think it could get a little bit like bricky at times if there's some stretches where teams get a little tired. But I think that's it. It's what do you get from Tatum and Brown, and what did they learn from 2022 that carries into now?
So, Jayson Tatum over the weekend did say he called this his second chance. This is the quote: "You don't always get a second chance, so really just looking at it as a second chance and trying to simplify things as much as we can. It's another series that we got to win." So your whole point about this being Jayson Tatum's second chance is exactly how he's viewing this, right? And he did not play well in the 2022 finals. He has not played well in these playoffs. And I'll just say, we can just simplify all this stuff. If Jayson Tatum plays like he's done in these playoffs, in these finals, the Celtics are not going to win this series. They're just not. He needs to be better. He needs to be better than what he's been over the last few weeks, and he needs to be better than what he was in 2022. Now, we remember the Game 4, Steph Curry masterpiece, Celtics up 2-1 in that series. Curry goes off, Tatum lays an egg. Game 6, back at TD Garden, a chance to even up the series and push it to 7 games. Steph Curry masterpiece, Tatum lays an egg. He turned the ball over 6 times in Game 4, 5 times in Game 6. He was turning the ball over more than 4 times a game in that postseason. The Celtics were not a good clutch team in that postseason. Now, the numbers are better this year, right? They're a better clutch team, all this stuff. Again, I kind of throw away the playoff numbers because I don't really care, but even in the regular season, they were a better clutch team. Tatum's turnovers have been cut in half since that season. He's only averaging about 2 turnovers per game. So he's a better player, in other words. But this is different, right? This is now the finals, and this is easily the best defense that they've faced, the best player that they've faced, and Tatum has not played well to this point, and he needs to play better.
I think the biggest difference is that was, even though the Celtics have made all these conference finals and that core had been together 5 seasons by the time of that Warriors finals, they're not the little brother in this series the way they were in that one. Mm-hmm. And I think that does change probably their own confidence just by way of time and having experienced that, and the fact that Dallas is probably newer to the stage, you would have to say, just
outside
even
of Kyrie,
though Luka,
outside of Kyrie,
Luka's been to the conference finals, Kyrie's been to the finals, but a lot of the rest of this roster is, I mean, there was that viral clip of PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford laughing at how awful their teams were like 4 months ago, and now they're in the finals. Like, it speaks to that difference. Whereas, yeah, you know, Porzingis is here now, Holiday's here now from last summer, but Derek White played in that finals, Horford played in that finals, even Peyton Pritchard, Luke Cornett, like most of the pieces that are here now went through that together. And I would also just throw in that there is not the Marcus Smart wild card in all of that. He was 5th in usage in that series, but all things considered, really 3rd because Cornett and Nesmith were ahead of him, who barely played. So the offense has changed in a way because of Brown and Tatum improving that I think just steadied them out quite a bit. And they're ready for that. I think both of them have become better passers. I think we all kind of laughed at Jaylen Brown about all the dribbling and passing situations, and then when he got better at it, we just chose not to pay attention. I think he's a much better playmaker even than he was last year. Not elite, but better. And I just trust them to kind of weather the storm of they're not going to face, kind of speaking to our first question, some massive Luka quarter and fall apart. I don't think that that's what this team will do. They don't blow teams out often. They don't get blown out often. And I think that will work to their benefit when we're talking about kind of winning the math game and stacking good possessions and good moments on top of each other. So I just think the maturity's there off the court and on the court in a way that they should feel like the favorites in this series.
The thing about this too that I think is going to be a little different from what we've seen, and we've hit on this a little bit with just what Luka averages 35 plus, is that Luka is unlike anyone, and Dallas's offense as a result is unlike anything they've seen in terms of like punching them in the face. It's just going to feel different. Like it just is. So in these playoffs, of anyone left, and really anyone in these playoffs in terms of games played, volume, whatever, Luka is the deadliest pull-up three-point shooter in these playoffs. It's a little down from his regular season numbers, but it's like for playoff numbers, it's really good. 34.9% on pull-up threes on 7.4 attempts per game. The only player who took more and was better was Damian Lillard, but he lost in the first round and got hurt. Like so, you throw that out, it doesn't matter. Luka's the best.
Also, that was probably inflated by like that one first half, if we're being honest.
Yeah, like it's like inflated. Then you go down to Kyrie. Kyrie is at 3.3 pull-up threes a game, 37.5%. You throw in his layup package. Yes, you trust Derek White and Drew Holiday and the Celtics defense to make it really hard on Kyrie to get some of that stuff off. It's Kyrie. Like, you kind of just expect he's going to have at least one game where he does some wizardry and figures this out and does some stuff and has a game where he's attacking the weak side and figures it out and has a second half where he has like 25. Like, they're going to get smacked in a way that we just have not seen this exact iteration of this team get smacked. And how that looks, I got to make time for it this week. I want to go back and watch how they played the Nuggets and the Clippers in the regular season. Because those are the two teams, like, when those two teams and they play them, those teams are at the peak of their powers. I don't remember the exact flows of those games, but those were the teams where it's like they played teams close to the peak of their powers. That feels most like Dallas at this point. Dallas is at the peak of their powers right now. I know the structures of those teams are different, but it's like the energy of those teams is like the closest I think you can get to Dallas right at this moment, where Dallas is confident, humming. And how did Boston feel in those moments defending their home court?
And the point that you're making about the tough shot making, that's what it's going to come down to that for both teams, right? The Celtics don't want to have to make the tough shots because they want the 5-out math stuff, but they're going to have to make those tough shots at some point.
Yeah.
And for all the things that we're talking about, what Boston can do defensively with the switching and all that kind of stuff, Minnesota was the best defense in the league the entire time, forced Dallas into the exact shots that they wanted to force them into for the most part until Game 5, basically. And Luka and Kyrie just still cooked them because they made those tough shots. They said, okay, these are the shots you're going to give us. We're going to make them. They're going to be tough, but we're going to make them anyway. And Boston's going to have to give them something. And Luka and Kyrie are going to just take stuff that they do want. But whatever Boston does give them, they're more than capable of making those shots too. And so if they make those tough shots, then they're going to probably win this series, where for the Celtics, there's a lot of different things that they're trying to do so that they don't have to make so many tough shots the way that Dallas is probably going to have to make. But Tatum and Brown are going to have to make tough shots. And when we're asking the overall question of, is this matchup better for Boston in these finals versus the 2022 matchup against the Warriors, I think the point that Brendon was getting at, where I think this is a worse matchup for this Celtics team. I think X's and O's wise, that Warriors team was the better matchup. They were smaller. Boston was able to match them up with size. They were able to, at least theoretically, able to switch everything, all these things. The problem was that mentally it was the worst matchup for them because of all the other stuff we're saying. Now, I do wonder if, like
with the Warriors, there was like in terms of size on defense, there was a Jordan Poole and there was a Steph Curry. Here, it's like it's just a Kyrie. Like there's one smaller guy. There was two.
Yeah, but I don't even trust them to really pick at that the right way. I mean, we've been screaming at Jayson Tatum for like his whole career to drive in and like bully guys, and he just doesn't do it. So therefore, I just assume he's never going to do it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with not playing like, 2016 LeBron all the time. I just think we kind of know who the Celtics are and the way that they're going to win. Yes, the size and who they can attack and all that. They do get mismatches. They do go into the post maybe more than they get credit for. But, I mean, to me, I just look at it as which team is going to be able to effectively take advantage of what those weak points are. And speaking of size in that Warriors matchup, if we remember, the name I didn't say from the other guys who did play a lot in that series that aren't here now is Robert Williams. They played two bigs a lot with Horford and him both out there in that series and then throughout that whole season under Ime Udoka to turn their defense around really during the second half of that season. I think that they will play more double bigs now that Porzingis is healthy, and that's something we haven't hit on. Now, who's off the court is a good question. But I would even like to see some Xavier Tillman in this series. I don't know if we will. I don't know if they can afford it on the offensive end. Missoula's hesitant to do that, but I think that will kind of help them stabilize things a little bit to have that additional back line even when Luka does play mismatch hunting ball. But the other thing is, on the other side, it's like maybe more to the point rather than the mismatch hunting stuff for Boston is just taking advantage of the space that they do create. Like it is a wide open opportunity that Dallas's rim protection has been so huge for them, and Boston can spread them out in a way that opens up the lane. But are they gonna get there? Both the Mavs and the Celtics have been among, I think, the bottom 5 in terms of at the rim frequency in their shot diet this postseason. They don't do it. They don't really want to. But I think it would benefit Boston to lean into that a little bit more than they have, no matter how they're getting there. They just have to try to really take advantage of that because they can't just trust. Dallas's wing defense is their strength. They can't just say we're going to make a contested shot or even a post-up or whatever over P.J. Washington's massive wingspan.
And I wouldn't be surprised if this whole idea that Porzingis can draw Gafford and Lively out of the paint, what if he doesn't? What if they just let him shoot? Right, and
that's a huge question because that's how Dallas has played. They've played the odds that even good shooting teams and good shooting players, they just say fuck it, and it's worked. And if can Boston make it work? Make it not work?
If KP's not 100%, then we never know how that shot looks. He might be a little rusty. I could see them just saying we're not going to do the thing that you want us to do, just because you tell everybody that Porzingis is this mismatch, deal breaker, matchup nightmare thing. You can keep telling the media that he's the most important player on their team. We don't care. We're not going to guard him.
We've had him in here. We know.
We didn't care
reliable,
then. We didn't pay attention to him then, and we're not going to pay attention to him now.
We sent him to the Wizards for a reason. Is what's going through their head. Yes, Brendon. To your point,
did you have a question?
I do.
I'm
gonna. Okay. We kind of already touched on mine, but I'm going to spring this one on you guys, and I think this is a good storyline to follow. Is the pressure on Jayson Tatum justified? Because this is all the talk, is that Jayson Tatum is under the most pressure out of any player in this series. His legacy is on the line. It's the biggest talking point going into this series. Do you think the way that we're talking about it is right? Do you think that the pressure on Tatum is real? And do you think it's justified having this conversation the way we're having it?
You go first, Chris.
I think it is. I think it's real because I think he is. I think it's probably a little bit overblown because I think he is not in the ilk of like a Luka. Like he is clearly not in that top 5 guy range, right? Like he's not. I don't think anyone has him in that upper echelon range. But he is one of the better players in the league. He's been a multiple-time All-NBA guy. He plays for a prestigious franchise. He is also a guy who's going to have multiple cracks at a title. At a certain point, it's like if you don't get it, you kind of want to what does it say if you haven't won it a couple times? And if you didn't get through, it's like it does just kind of reflect on you in a certain way if you didn't get through there. It's a little bit unfair, I think, to just pick at him because it's not all on him. This isn't just a failing of Jayson Tatum. It never is for any of these things, just a failing of one guy that you didn't win a title, right? It doesn't ever work that way. But I think the pressure is on him to some degree. I think it's on him and the Jays, and I think that organization that this has been an odyssey dating back to the Isaiah Thomas era. It's dating back to 2017, 16, building up to get to here. It was 2022 to get here. Now it's here. Now they're even more all in. It's really you have a window right now. So I think there is pressure in that sense that he's at the head of this team trying to break through in a window where it is kind of right now all in. So, yeah, I think in that sense the pressure's there. But is the pressure on him for, his legacy? No, he's still really young. I mean, he's 19 years old. He's got forever.
I think the last part of what you said actually proves why it shouldn't be on him. because, I mean, you said the Jays, you said the organization. Yeah, collectively, there is pressure. It's funny. Like, I've been thinking about what would it mean or look like, or how would we think about it if they did win? And obviously, their history makes it more. There's more of a story there, rather than maybe like the 2004 Pistons, who would be somewhat of a comp where, oh, damn, they got Rasheed Wallace, now they beat the Lakers and they won it. And I feel like that almost makes that championship a little bit inflated to us because it came out of nowhere. And then what's funny is they make the conference finals for like 5 years after that and they never break through again. Imagine if it happened the opposite way. We would be like, and then the Pistons finally got their act together and won a championship. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there is a lot of pressure to trade so much stuff and be right there. And eventually you would just think, like, stuff kind of just has to break your way. Like, how could it not? Like, you've been right there, injuries, different things. Like, it should just happen for you. But with Tatum, it's like, we just want it to be something different than it is. And I think the fact that he's been around for so long works against him because of that. It's like, yeah, he's a lot closer to old Dirk or Chauncey or whatever of those types of comps that you want to put out there than he is to LeBron James or Michael Jordan. And, like, we can spin around talking about it forever, but they understood that, which is why they have, like, the most talented starting five we've seen since the Warriors, and depth, and they've churned through coaches, one against their choice, but whatever. And, like, they've tried all this stuff. They know they can't put it all on him, so they didn't. So putting the pressure on him is just, like, ignoring reality to a degree. And, I mean, he has to be great for them to win, don't get me wrong, but, like, we don't have to turn it into, like, he has to be as good as Luka. Like, okay, well, you're just kind of setting yourself up for the next take if you're going to put it that way. That's not what's going to need to happen.
It's all the things that we're saying is true, and it's why there's pressure on him, but there's also not pressure on him. It's sort of both things here, because they don't need him to be Luka to win the series. And like you said, Brad Stevens, in constructing the roster the way that he did, was an acknowledgement that we don't have a top 5 guy, and we probably are never going to have one. Jayson Tatum's not going to be there, and yet he does need to be. He can't be what he's been in these playoffs. He does need to, and he can't be what he was in the 2022 finals. He needs to have the best series of his career, I think, for the Celtics to win this championship. And there is, and the thing is, if they don't win it, it's probably going to be because of Jayson Tatum. And so in that regard, there is still a lot of pressure on him. I guess the other version of this question too is, like, is there anything he can do in these finals to be considered one of those top, like, 5 guys, to be on that level of Luka and on all these other guys? Is there anything he can do? Because this is sort of what Celtics fans are terrified of. It's what the Celtics organization acknowledged that he's not, but they kind of need him to be, or they kind of have been trying to push him to that level. Is there anything that he can do in these finals for us to kind of reconsider that ceiling that we kind of already put on him?
I don't think so. I don't. Like, I
if
would
he
take
goes out
some
and averages 50.
Okay, but
Yeah,
okay.
That's kind of what I'm at. Like, what does he have to do?
Yeah,
like what would it, in other words, let me read.
So if he has the greatest finals performance of modern NBA history, then yes, Wes, I will say that he is a tough.
Would you really? Jason Flacco.
Yeah, exactly. Would you just say, "Wow, he had a great series," but I still don't.
I will say he's elite. Like, in is Jason Flacco if he averages 50 in a series.
Okay.
I mean, if he has, there is a world where, like, I think you could go into next year where, like, he is maybe you could argue he's, like, ahead of, like, a Shea type, but I don't think he's getting into, like, the Luka Giannis category. Like, it's like the butting against, like, a Shea type is where you could see him get against. That's kind of the ceiling.
I think the thing he has to do, to your point about this series, Wes, the shooting, it's 29% from 3 in this playoffs. That's just not going to work, because if you think about what he's been able to do, like last year, Game 7 against Philly, or some of his best moments, for better or worse, it does revolve around him making that shot, and specifically pull-up threes to punish switches to just kind of get himself into that really, really hot zone, he has to shoot better than 29% from deep. That's dipping his overall true shooting to basically like league average or just below. But to bring back something Chris said, turnover-wise, highest turnover rate of his NBA postseason career was the year they made the finals by a mile. This year, it's the lowest outside of the 1 year in the COVID season in 2021 when they bowed out in 5 games. So he's cleaned that up. I think one thing that would change maybe how I feel about his value, if not the whole pecking order nonsense, is we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago, Wes, when we were trading off takes, and I said he's kind of the apex version of a modern NBA wing. I think you said he was like an AI-generated wing. I would wonder what it could look like if the rest of the team offensively could pick up enough slack, and Jaylen's done a lot that would make you think they maybe could, and if Porzingis can add to that, if he just really leaned into like, I'm like the best version of what like at LSU we thought like Ben Simmons could be. You know what I mean? Just obviously a much more polished scorer than Ben Simmons ever became, but like locking people down, rebounding the hell out of the ball, making the right play, just sort of being like the
this is
most
everything
elite version of a glue guy.
This is what the Celtics have been saying about Tatum while his shooting numbers have been down, is like, well, he sets awesome screens. And you know what? Like, that's cool.
Which I didn't say. You can't.
No, you
I'm
didn't.
not going
but
that far.
But that has been sort of the narrative coming out of Boston. And I'm gonna answer my own question. I think all the pressure is justified. It's on him. It is. And I don't like doing this apology thing for these Celtics guys. And this might be my anti-Boston bias, but it's already starting to happen where people are like, oh, well, look at everything they've accomplished throughout their careers, and it shouldn't all be on why do we criticize these stars this way? Because they're stars. And this is the whole point. And this is what we do. And if you're the best player on the best team with a net rating that's better than the 97 Bulls or whatever this crap is, you just got to be a player that people fear. And you have to be a player who kind of gets up for these moments and for these opportunities. And I do think that all of it is justified. I just think it comes with the territory. And now all of a sudden we're just going to like, because we feel like we know what Jayson Tatum is and we feel like we've been too critical of stars in the past, we're just going to let these guys skirt by. No, the pressure's on. Pressure's on. This is what the whole thing's for.
I love that this whole us talking through this pretty much just like when we now give our predictions, it's going to be very obvious. Like all of our biases have just shown through in all these ways. And then it's just like, all right, yeah, here's our thing. And you kind of know where we're already at. But
so give us your prediction, Brendon.
Well, hold on.
You got a point before?
Yeah. No, number one, I didn't have Ben Simmons' name appearing on the bingo card of things that would come up today. I understand it wasn't like
especially as a Jayson
NBA.
Tatum comp.
Yeah, not a thing I had coming up. Can I give you guys just
best case scenario? Jayson Tatum is Ben Simmons. Put that on the quote thing.
Yeah, that's going to be a graphic. I really need that to happen. Can I give you
when he has like a 18-point triple-double on 70% shooting and they win by 20 in game 2, I'll have you guys back on the show. We'll do another 3 trio episode. We'll just kind of revel in it. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I want to give you guys a couple like bet things that I think will tease this even more before we do predictions, because this will even tilt our hand even more. Okay, number 1. Jayson Tatum is the betting favorite for Finals MVP, and I just like from a betting value perspective, I'm outright rejecting it. Luka at plus 200 is like my favorite bet for Finals MVP. If they're the favorite,
then
yeah, I know.
Odds-wise,
I know,
that makes sense.
I know, but it's no value out of it. So
Yeah.
Luka at plus 200 is my favorite
That's
Finals
the best
MVP
value.
bet. This is a BetMGM.
It's
My
crazy
favorite
that
Boston
it's that,
one.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
I know. My favorite Boston one though is Jaylen at plus 2,000. I'm just like staring at that, thinking about it.
It's plus 2,000. That's literally my pick.
Yeah.
So great. Sign me up.
Jaylen at plus 2,000 is the Boston is the other MVP pick at BetMGM. It is like way out there. Like it is
code just basketball. I'm about to be going to town
you're about
there.
to So that is once you get past Luka and Jayson, it goes into like Kyrie's way up there. Derek, I've thought about
what's Kyrie's.
It's like I think it's like plus 4,000 if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
When I looked, it's Derek White's about plus 4,000 as well. I've thought about the Derek
honestly,
White.
Given the narrative around Kyrie lately, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants some more media people over when they hand out that little slip of paper on game 5, 6, 7, and people have to write
really
it down.
changed.
He might get some votes.
He's really
yeah, I've been thinking about that as well, and would not shock me one way or the other. It's just Luka. Luka feels like the Jokic thing last year, where it's like it's just so integral to what they do, where it just feels like kind of obvious. Yep. But if Kyrie averaged like 28 and 7 the whole series, then I'd be like, yeah, I could see it.
All right.
To me,
Can I get my pick?
I have two more bets. Over 5.5 total games this series is at -165. Obviously not plus value, so not great value. That just feels like a lock to me. As much as anything could be
like
a lock.
easy. Yeah, feels easy.
Like you
I thought
could
that
get
about
plus
Dallas,
five.
Minnesota, though. So I feel like I'm kind of off the projection boat on the game length here.
All I'm saying is like I would be flabbergasted if this was like a 4 or a 5 game series. I would be flabbergasted. So I'm just saying that's mine.
Right.
If you wanted to say this is a 7 game, that's plus value. And the last one, this tilts my hand at my pick just a little bit. If you're feeling really bold, Mavs in 6 is at plus 400. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Is that your
That's
pick?
That's my pick. Mavs in 6.
Who's your finals MVP?
Luka +2. I'm taking Luka as MVP.
Brendon?
Yeah, I'm going Celtics in 7, and I have Jaylen Brown as MVP. I think guarding Luka will help the narrative, even though they're going to cross-match and switch a ton. And then, look, he's been productive and efficient as a scorer. I think we're all in agreement Tatum has to pick up more slack there for them to win this series, but Brown has kind of been that guy. So if that even just continues and then Tatum obviously does a little more, but you're guarding Luka, you can kind of make the case. So Brown for MVP, Celtics in 7.
I've got Mavericks in 6, Luka at MVP. Question back to you guys. How hard was your finals pick to make? Brendon, for 7 games, Celtics, was that sort of the 7-game hedge? You think it's going to be really close and you ultimately just sort of settled on the Celtics?
I honestly kind of wanted to say Celtics in 6. I just can't really see them winning it on the road.
Right. That's sort of why I have Mavs, and I was like, Mavs in 7. I'm like, yeah, but if they win the series, it's probably on their home court in Game 6.
It feels that way. Dallas, I would say, what's weird is both of these teams are very good on the road historically throughout the whole playoffs. Luka's over 500 on the road in his playoff career. Boston, notorious for being somehow better on the road. Of course, last year with the Heat, the most notable example. So it could really go any of those ways, but I favor Boston by a bit here, so I could see it.
Chris?
This was hard because it's a head and a heart kind of thing. Because my head is telling me Boston, because I think that is they have the best process of any team in the league. They have, I think, a better overall construction of role guys that I like, and they should be fresher, like they just should be. But there's something with this Dallas team, with the mentality that they're playing with right now, with the way Luka's playing right now, with the way their defense is locked in, with the way they have escalated through this playoff run, that I just am so attracted to right now and like buying into right now, that I'm maybe a little bit a prisoner of the moment with them. But there's something in the way they are playing and the way they're carrying themselves that I am just in love with. There's an edge to them that I just am in love with.
I feel like we were talking about the series length thing. I think if you're just mapping out a world where it's a short series, it would probably be more likely, well, there's the Luka factor, but I think that the floor for Dallas is lower. I think we're sort of, what happens if there's a series where all these guys we've been raving about as far as Dallas's role players
they implode.
Look more like we've known them to look for more than just the past 4 months than just what they've looked like for the past 4 months, and they're not hitting shots and they're not as effective on defense and whatever.
Right.
Whereas Boston, it's like, what does the floor falling out look like? The turnovers problem has kind of been fixed. There's no Grant Williams and Marcus Smart craziness. There's no Robert Williams injury risk. Like Porzingis, they just kind of survived without him. Like, I think
you're right. The Celtics have the highest floor in the league, but the Mavericks probably have a higher ceiling. Can they reach that ceiling? And if the answer is yes, then they win the series. For me, this was actually the hardest thing for me was whether it was going to go 6 or 7. I feel really good about the Mavericks in this spot.
Yeah.
I really like this matchup. To me, I just don't see how, like, Boston has no weaknesses, and I think we've all established that. But I kind of like the more unstoppable factor that's Luka Doncic over sort of like the no weakness thing here, because I don't look at anything
on your side, Wes.
Right? And I don't look at anything the Celtics do and think, yeah, the Mavericks are going to be scared of that. Like, they're not, And I think that this is the biggest question, and it's why we started this thing, was how do they guard Luka, is the biggest question. Is like, what do you do with this guy? And the Celtics don't have any, what do we do with this guy thing. It's just, it is, and that's why they have all the math and all this stuff and whatever. And it's great. They're going to have to find a way to bring the 3-point attempts down in Boston. They're about 40 3-point attempts per game in the postseason, same as they were in the regular season. But I also think the point that Chris was getting to before about how this team just feels right now, I think the Celtics are the same that they were at the end of the regular season. I think they're just as good as they were at the end of the regular season. And I think the Mavericks have gotten better through these playoffs. They are playing their best ball of the season right now. And maybe the Celtics don't have to be better than they were at the end of the regular season because their net rating was 1 billion and all this great stuff. And maybe that team is just good enough and was always good enough to win a championship. But these teams are really close. Way closer than the regular season record, way closer than the net rating would lead most people to believe. And so I do feel good about the Mavericks pick. And I'm a little shocked how big of underdogs they are in this series, to be honest.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I do. Last thing I will say about Boston that I do think they deserve a lot of credit for in getting here is that I think, and this is maybe worth unpacking in the summer for us, the way they've built this team, I do think is a new way in some ways of building a team, of just saying we understand we didn't get a top 5 guy. Mm-hmm. We don't have whatever, but we've literally rounded everything else out, and we have like okay enough depth on the periphery. Yes, we have like a finite window still because like we have to pay the 8th best guy like he's going to be the best guy in the league because Tatum's about to get like that fat contract in about 2 months or whatever, or a month. But they have built a team that is like devoid of weaknesses, like it is like a real 15-man roster in a way that I wonder if other teams that end up in the situation where they have a really good guy who is clearly not the 5th best guy, and I wonder if other teams try to do something similar to this and what that looks like. Because there's something to this model that is interesting.
It is. And what happens in this series could determine whether or not other teams try to build like that, because they could ultimately say, well, the Celtics did everything they could. They got the biggest break in the world with the Damian Lillard trade and Drew Holiday kind of landing in their doorstep.
And being in the weaker conference. And being in the weaker
conference. Every break they could have gotten, they got it. And they still lost to the best player in the league because they just don't have that guy. And if that happens, then maybe they say, okay, then that team building model isn't worth spending all the money. We just got to go get that guy.
I thought you were going to say they landed a big break by the Nets wanting Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce 10 years ago, and then the Sixers being in love with Markelle Fultz, because that's really, where the origins
also
of this.
Also that.
Idiotic teams handing the Celtics a golden platter of a championship roster was, pretty nice as well. Can the Pistons go there? Can the Pistons turn Cade Cunningham into a championship caliber lead guy? I don't think so.
Well, let's start with this. Troy Weaver out as general manager of the Pistons as they've shaken up their front office. Trajan Langdon? How was that?
Trajan? I think Trajan Langdon.
All right, Trajan Langdon is now running the show there in Detroit. They've got $60+ million in cap space that they can create. How should the Pistons handle this offseason, Brendon?
I think in general, be opportunistic, kind of follow what the Wizards are doing right now. Luckily, you have the thing that they haven't gotten yet, which is your number 1 guy, and I still believe Cade can be that until further notice. I also think, despite how hard they've made it look, building a good team around Cade Cunningham should be really freaking easy. He's not too dissimilar from Luka stylistically and how much he can lift the floor of an offense. So I'm not saying he's as good as Luka. I'm not saying he's proven to be quite that high of a guy, especially because his jumpers haven't really gone in consistently as a pro. But you're not building around the craziest puzzle piece in the world. You're building around exactly what we know works in the modern NBA, which is a guy who can run a lot of pick and roll, create his own shot, and make his teammates better. Just sort of fill in the gaps around that, and you're going to be able to be pretty decent. So, yeah, I mean, they have a Quentin Grimes extension potentially. Evan Fournier, I would say goodbye to. They have a team option there. They don't really need the trade chip of keeping him around because they have the most cap space in the NBA. I think we've
Cunningham's
all
up
touched
for an
on
extension also.
Yeah, and I would max him out personally. I mean, what are you going to do? He's a number 1 overall pick, and you don't want to piss him off, really.
Quentin Grimes is. Did you buy
lowballing him?
Did you, if you looked at Quentin Grimes, as a once loved Quentin Grimes, his Pistons numbers, shockingly.
I mean, what was it like? 10
I would be
games?
trying to
How much
poach
did
him
he
if I was
even
another
play there?
team. Get him. He's a classic. When he was in a good situation in New York, he was a good player. Then he went to a bad situation, and his numbers declined. If I was
14% from 3.
I'd be
He
trying
played
to
6 games, Chris. I mean,
I'm just saying. It's just like
I could
wow.
pull
It's
6
just like,
games
wow.
from a lot of guys
Yeah,
that
that's
look
true.
pretty ugly.
That's true. I know. It's just like wow.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brendan. Build around Cade. Just give him the salary, whatever. What are you going to do? You're the Pistons. You have no other options. So just give him the money. I think he's going to reach that ceiling. I still have all my Cade Cunningham stock, and I feel good about it. What do you do with
He
the
just has
60
feel.
million?
He just
He
has such a
great
feel that it's
he's
like,
got the
how
size
could
to
you
make
not
every
buy him?
pass. Just do it. They need shooting. They're dead last, or not dead last, but they've been in the bottom 5 in the league in 3-point shooting over the last feels like decade. They need to add shooters around them. To your point, but there's pieces I like here. They're weirdly like kind of devoid of draft capital. Like they owe a lot of stuff going out. So I would maybe use this cap space, not all of it, because you do need to go get real NBA players to get out of the lottery. But maybe use $20 million of space, kind of earmark that as, hey, we'll take on your bad contract for some more draft picks to kind of help us in our build, because we need to kind of restock our supplies there. But go just, the Tobias Harrises, the Malik Monks, the Buddy Hields, like these guys that are not going to necessarily be, exciting big name free agents. You might have to overpay them because you're the Pistons, but these are the kinds of guys who can shoot and space the floor and are veterans who you can bring in, add some oomph to those lineups, and just kind of start moving forward.
I like DeAnthony Melton there.
Yep.
I like Gary Trent Jr. there. Similar names. I have a list of guys that they could take back in those trades too. D'Angelo Russell, Tyler Hero, Yusuf Nurkic, Ben Simmons, Julius Randle, CJ McCollum. Guys on teams we know are going to want to be active, but who their trade partner might not want the guy. Just be that team. I mean, that's what the Wizards did last year. They have Jordan Poole, but they got some stuff for it. You can stomach it if you're probably can't take somebody back as low value on the court as Jordan Poole, considering the Pistons do already have Cade and are trying to win somewhat. But I think you should be willing to kind of take that chance. And I think to the point you made in our video last week, Wes, some of these second draft guys, if you can pry those on top of it. Hey, we'll take CJ McCollum, maybe a weak first-round pick, but could you toss like Dyson Daniels our way too? Or whatever that might look like. I think this roster could look a lot different pretty quickly, but that's not a bad thing as long as you kind of still have your core of Cade, and hopefully Duren can still turn into something. And I don't know what they're going to do with Jaden Ivey, but I would be trying to keep him personally. And then they have Asar Thompson and whoever they take at 5. So I don't know. Last year shouldn't have been so bad. Last year should not have been as bad as it got. This team is not 25 games in a row losing bad.
Well, let me ask you this, guys. It's kind of like my bigger concern here, and I understand last year was 1 year. This was the first year of this guy's contract, and I understand he's owed a lot of money. Are we sure they shouldn't also just fire Monty Williams like today and just go try to pick? Like you could tell me it's Kenny Atkinson they should try to hire, or Johnny Bryant, or pick your assistant who fixed the Will Hardy and Mark Daigneault like mold. But to me, it's like I think the way Monty Williams handled the Jaden Ivey thing tells you that he was the wrong guy for this job in the first place. Because the whole point of this job right now is developing the young guys. That's the whole point of this job, is developing and getting the most out of those young guys. You can tell me James Borrego. I know he was really hard on. I know James Borrego was like really hard on LaMelo, and that rubbed LaMelo the wrong way. But like James Borrego got more out of LaMelo in that 1 year than any other coach has gotten out of LaMelo's entire career. You should be going to find the coach who's going to get the most out of those young guys right now. And I'm just saying, like, I think it's maybe just Trajan Langdon should probably just look at that first. I think all the other stuff is like a nice window dressing. All the other stuff is going to matter. I don't know how much I can get more excited about what's going on in Detroit right now unless you just get a different coach.
I'll say this. I don't know that there's a rush to fire Monty Williams. Like, there's a big problem with the roster also. And if you just kind of fix the roster and make it make more sense and then see what Monty Williams can do with that, then maybe you're not out all the money that you're going to have to pay him anyway if you fire him. Yeah. I do think that there's something like Monty Williams had a really bad season as a coach. He's a better coach than that. And there's, I think you definitely have to. I wouldn't be against just giving him another year with a better roster and just seeing what happens. And then if it doesn't, like, what are you rushing towards if you're the Pistons?
But is his strength what you need right now?
So that's the other
those
point.
things in alignment? Yeah.
Can you make a big swing, like a trade where you maybe move Ivy and maybe even I wouldn't trade Thompson, but like if Monty Williams doesn't want to coach a young team, then don't give him a young team. Go get if Cade Cunningham is ready to be max extended and he's going to be that guy, and he had a good year last year. His pull-up shooting numbers are getting better. If you think he's ready to take that next leap, then maybe you push some of these younger chips in who don't necessarily fit with him and make your Sabonis deal, right? The way that the Kings moved Halliburton for Sabonis, and maybe you're losing some of that value on a guy like Ivy or Thompson or something like that, but you can go get a legit sort of tent pole second player with your Cade Cunningham. Maybe that's something that they can do.
Well, here's the thing. As maybe the Monty expert among all of us, I think we do this thing where we assume because a guy is in his 50s or 60s, he's therefore no longer a coach for young guys. And he came to Phoenix in 2019, and that roster was all guys in their younger to mid-20s, and we all thought he was, amazing back then. So I know he's 5 years older. I don't think that makes him no longer equipped to develop talent. So I don't think he's not a developmental coach, but I guess my question and honestly stylistically too, like building a pick and roll offense and a defense that can kind of be greater than the sum of its parts, like that's exactly what he did with the Suns. So I think what Monty's strengths are and what the Pistons theoretically would be wanting to do, I do think aligns, and I still think it aligns. They also, to your guys' point, like in addition to the roster being kind of messed up, they were hurt last year in a really extreme way that I think we looked over, right? Like you can laugh at the fact that Joe Harris and Monte Morris were their two like acquisitions last offseason, and the Joe Harris one especially, given that he was so injury riddled in his last few years in Brooklyn, probably was a stupid thing to do. But Monte Morris didn't play up until they traded him. Bojan Bogdanovic was hurt. All those minutes early in the year where Asar Thompson was like all over Instagram for all of us, like the minute they got healthy, that dude didn't play much. So that should tell you, even though he was fun, what their real goals were. So that brings me back to like, Chris, you said, is Monty the right guy to be achieving the goals that they have, which is developing the talent? So even if we might disagree if he's the right guy to do that and there's better options and blah, 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 I don't think that's actually what their goal is. They're the Detroit Pistons. Yeah. They don't want to be bad and develop their talent. They want to win. He was brought in to win. He didn't do that either, but I think that speaks more to the injuries. So I think a big trade like what Wes is saying is probably the most likely outcome here. I can tell them to be opportunistic and do a nice little value deal for DeAnthony Melton or take back CJ McCollum in a trade all I want. I don't think that's what they want to do here. Yeah. I think that they see Cade. They see decent enough young depth. They said, we already did the being shitty part. We need to start taking a step forward. And I think Monty probably can do that for them. So I just think there's a little bit of a difference in view and vision versus reality. I guess the wild card is just, well, what does Trajan Langdon think, and what did they empower him to do? Because maybe that, throws a wrench in it. I really don't know. But I don't think that I don't think their goal for this upcoming season is like, can Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Asar Thompson become starting caliber players? I think it's like, can we win 40 games?
And that's a similar spot that Houston was in last summer, right? And they went out and got Fred VanVleet and did all these things. There's no real free agent like that.
No, there's nothing like that.
But they do have the cap space to make a trade. So I guess if they were going to make that big swing,
that could be it.
That
not
could be
quite as
good,
but
that's help. But they do need that other guy, right?
Yeah.
Like to your point. And so, who are some of the names that are out there that would make sense for the Pistons? Like, does Jarrett Allen make sense as a target for them? Is that sort of that second?
I like that. I
like it as a fit. Is he good enough to be that second guy? Maybe.
Like, he would be
empowered a little bit more.
That is a great. Even if he is exactly what he is, and he is a asset to help Cade just make Cade's life easier, that in itself is a win. If you give that kind of, how about Hartenstein for them? If you just are the team that gives Hartenstein a lot of money.
They could throw
it's funny that we're overlooking a guy who you mentioned they're out of draft capital. The reason for that in some part is they've made a trade for Jalen Duren, who was a center, who was a lottery pick. And I think he's a really interesting part of this because he was also hurt a lot last year, one of the guys I didn't mention a minute ago. And he's this dude who you watch him and you're like, damn, he can do everything. And then you look and it's like, really low block rate for a center, not an amazing rebounder. The offensive
and he's 20.
skill level is really theoretical. So they're kind of in this weird in-between zone of like, how much can they believe in him versus maybe you're kind of in a, well, do you trade him now and get the most value you ever will? That's a fascinating one. In addition to just the fact that Ivy and Cade, their fit has always been somewhat of a question. But the only other thing is the draft, and we talked about this briefly with Zach last week, Wes. As little as I know about the draft overall, the fit that I'm already the most sold on is Reed Shepherd to the Pistons at 5. They need shooting. They need a ball handler who makes them a little bit more sound structurally, which Ivy is not quite that kind of high floor. He's a little more mercurial. Shepherd as an off-ball guy next to Cade, I love the idea of. So hopefully they can do that. Because the other guys around there are international guys or freshmen or whatever that are very, very raw. And I don't think that's what they're in the business of right now, is like developing Ron Holland or something. You know,
Does
I think they kind of want to hit the ground running.
Does BetMGM have odds on Zach LaVine ending up here? They could use the cap space. There was a report recently that the Bulls might be willing to attach draft picks to him. Like,
was that also not a thing last year? The Pistons were like linked as a possible LaVine team. Was that not a thing last year?
It feels like that's the crash course. Like, we all have really good ideas on here, and it feels like we're on a crash course of LaVine ending up in Detroit.
Yeah,
I would at least prefer Hero.
The Tyler Hero trade I like. I've definitely had that in the trade machine a couple of times while perusing. All right, I have one question for you guys before we sign off here. All right, so I was telling you guys before we started recording here that I was at a ball game yesterday.
Yep.
And it was Flanagan's Day at Lone Depot Park where the Miami Marlins play. And what was interesting about Flanagan's Day is, and for people that don't know what Flanagan's is, it's it's a South Florida chain. It's a sports bar, and it's awesome. That's it. That's what you need to know. And they're famous for their ribs. The ribs are delicious. And they had a pop-up concession stand for Flanagan's where they sold the ribs. And I was like, wow, that's really exciting and really interesting. And I thought about it. I was like, I don't want to eat ribs at a baseball game. It's not a great baseball game food. So my question to you guys is, what is the best baseball game food? What is your go-to?
The hot dog it's a hot dog and some peanuts and a beer, and I'm not overthinking this.
Mustard? Ketchup?
Yeah, stadium mustard, like the brown, like little spicy mustard.
You want that?
Maybe some onion. Yeah. Or
And
bratwurst.
ketchup, or just mustard?
Just mustard.
Just mustard.
I'm not a huge hot dog person. I'm not saying I won't, but it's not where I'm going first. Honestly, when in doubt at any sporting event, especially if it's the stadium, I don't know the local kind of, that's like the specialty little meal place, and I don't want to mess with any of that. Personal pizza. That's like my safe, but that's not really baseballish. That's just like me being
it is
myself. But
it's like that's a sports,
nobody be like
sports food.
Baseball and pizza. I don't know.
Pepperoni, cheese. What's the
pepperoni?
Pepperoni.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
I think
just
I
a little, 8-inch, whatever. Just a little box.
Yep.
Eat that. Enough to soak up the beer that inevitably is going to be involved, and then maybe get a real meal after the game.
Underrated option, I will say, if it's particularly not a day where I've enjoyed some beverages. If I want a little sweet treat, take myself back to childhood. It's usually like $15, so it's like a little expensive. Give me a little ice cream cone, and it takes me back.
I don't know that I've ever had that actually.
Like, just a great little.
It's a dying breed. Not a lot of helmet.
There should be more ice cream and more helmets. That's where we stand.
I got one at a I got one at a minor league game like a week ago for like $6, and I was like, I have faith in America again because it was $6.
Yeah. Minor league and spring training baseball is absolutely the way to do it. Everything is cheaper, but the experience is the same because, as we were talking about before we hit record, what's happening on the diamond is kind of like 4th or 5th on my list of priorities there. So if I can get in, spend less money, and have just as good of a time, sign me up.
This is what I did. I got an ice cream for $6. My ticket was $10, and I saw a 21-year-old 6-foot left-hander from Canada who's 270 pounds named Tugboat Pitch What a better way to spend a Saturday.
good afternoon.
You know what I mean?
It's a good afternoon.
It's a great time. Not a better Saturday.
To me, it's the hot dog. I'm not a hot dog. I don't like hot dogs. I could go so far as to say I don't even really enjoy a hot dog. But when I'm at the baseball stadium, something about me needs that hot dog that's wrapped in the foil, that's been steaming in it for the last 3 hours.
Oh yeah,
little wrinkled.
Little wrinkled. I'm not, and you open it up. I like the yellow mustard right on top, a light beer, and I'm happy. Something about me, there's the energy, the vibes. I need to have that as part of the entire experience.
I agree.
I think we just found our show clip for the week, for the episode.
That's it.
All of our opinions on hot dogs. Forget the
I'm
Pistons
about to go.
or the Mavs or the Celtics.
Yeah, about to go to a baseball game. I might have to get a hot dog. Wasn't planning on it, but I think I'm gonna have to get a hot dog.
That's what happens.
All right, that's been the Just Basketball show for Monday, June 3rd. We covered hot dogs, beer, helmet, ice cream, and the NBA Finals and the Detroit Pistons. Let's recap our picks real quick. I'm Mavs in 6.
Mavs in 6.
Wes and
Mavs in
Brendon.
6.
Celtics in 7.
Check out all of our stuff across all our platforms. YouTube, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, so thank you so much. We'll be doing some more on YouTube now that we hit 1,000. That's right, hit the sound effects. Check us out on TikTok. I'll be doing a betting finals video based on some of those bets perhaps that I talked about going out on Monday to get you a little bit of lead time into that. And we'll be doing stuff on Instagram, all of that and more. Check us out. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. This has been the Just Basketball show for Monday, June 3rd. Enjoy the hoops, everyone. We'll talk to you later this week.